Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of the Straight Fire Podcast. It is a joy and pleasure to have you all here as we unpack today's topic. Today's topic will be about gambling. I was just talking to Noah and Landon, and if this is the first podcast I'd ever done, I would have had statistics for you all. I would have had so many numbers. I would have had, NBC News stories. I would have had the whole works to set the scene for gambling, but really, today, all I can tell you is a lot of people do it.
He slacked off.
Yeah, well,
a lot of people do it.
A lot of people do. A lot of people do gamble, and they gamble in various different ways, right? Sports betting, your average gambling casino, right, and all of the types of gambling
lottery.
that you have. See,
Horse races.
I don't gamble, so I don't know anything about gambling. I feel like it would be really suspicious if I just sat down and started rattling off all the different kinds of gambling ways there are and like odds and stuff like that. The only thing I keep up with is sports betting because, as a sports fan, it kind of helps set the stage. But that's all I have. Do y'all have anything you want to talk about gambling?
I was just gonna say I guess we should preface basically saying that like none of us have ever like gambled like that before. No. But we're not talking about information about gambling. We're talking about information that comes from the Bible, which we do have. So we do have the authority from the Bible, not from ourselves, to speak about these things.
Right. Some of our podcasts, like we've done like comparison and validation, a lot of those things we can talk to people, that are in the world or in the church, and you can relate to this.
Yeah.
This is a topic that's going to be a little different because if you don't have this love for the Word of God, I lost the word that I was going to use, but we can go with the love for the Word of God and that faithfulness to it. A lot of this about gambling is not going to matter to you. So a lot of the stuff, or at least that I'm going to bring up, is going to be more for Christians, principles that I'm going to bring up, things like that. So this is going to kind of be more towards Christians, at least from my perspective.
And for the Christians who are listening, maybe they've got a friend who maybe they want to become converted, but they have this problem. Maybe there's a lot of different ways that you can apply the principles that we're going to talk about here in the real world.
One of the things also the first podcast Benjamin would have done, he would have had like stats. He would have had stats that back up why gambling is so addictive and stuff like that. But baseline, we all know it to be gambling is addictive. And one of the things that's so interesting about gambling is it's not winning that makes gambling addictive. It's the odds of winning or losing. It's the unpredictability.
Yeah,
good job.
Yes, it is the unpredictability of gambling that makes it so addicting.
Yeah.
Right. But the question that we're getting into today is the main question is, why is gambling a sin? Is it a sin at all? I believe we all know, or we all have the answer for it, or at least Noah and Landon do. I'm kind of along for the ride with the rest of you guys. But I'm the question asker, and so I'll go ahead and jump into the first one.
I'll let you kick it off.
Okay.
I just want to start with, usually Benjamin's the guy that tells you the definition for the word, but I found this definition for gambling that I think is really going to set the stage
actually, please.
for when we go through this, because a lot of people are like, well, the difference between like gambling and the stock market and gambling and all this. Well, let's go ahead and set the stage for what we mean by gambling, and this obviously didn't originate with me, but gambling involves three things. An uncertain or arbitrary event. In other words, I'm going to do something that I may or may not win. I have this event. Number two, there's a wager. There's something of value that I have to put in with the chance that I'm going to lose it. And then number three, there's a winner and there's a loser. And there's always more losers than there are winners. And the winner wins at the direct loss of the other gamblers. And I think that kind of just, there it is.
Yeah, I'm so glad he gave that definition.
Okay, so I have a few questions about that definition.
Oh,
already.
boy.
Here we go.
Go ahead and play
Devil's advocate.
Devil's advocate.
Benjamin stepping into the room. So, if gambling is there is one direct winner and one direct loser.
Not one. There's many. There's
One winner, many losers.
around that. Yeah.
What about when you're playing a game directly against like the house?
What do you mean? The house.
The house is the term for when
Oh.
you're not
And
betting.
he said he
against
didn't know
people.
anything about gambling.
I've watched the movies. Okay, that's it. But the house is like like if I'm playing a slot machine, I'm not playing against anyone else. I'm only playing against the house.
You're still. You're still gambling away money, and you're still losing a majority of the time.
I mean, your win still has to come to the direct loss of.
Yeah, I mean, if you win,
But those people are evil.
Well,
anyway,
no.
right?
Listen,
Everyone wants the house to lose.
if you win, then all of them lose, right? So there's still one winner, many losers. Now, but think about it from their. But think about it.
Always making that money.
Think
back.
about because from their perspective, there's so many losers, right? So it's the same way. If you win, all of the house loses. But the house has so many losers that they're the only ones that win and everyone else loses. So the definition still works.
Okay, all right. That was the question. I think I had another one in there, but I lost it. So it'll probably come back. It'll make its way back around. First question though, is casual gambling, and I'm throwing this one in there just because it's so popular now and it's so accessible now. Because is casual gambling and sports betting a sin, right? Because there are a lot of apps and stuff that allow you to do this very easily. And I say, is casual gambling a sin? Because, in sports betting, and the only reason that's even a question is because we a lot of times as a society, especially as an American westernized society, we spend a lot of money on things we don't need. So why is spending money on gambling wrong when I can spend money on other, like for instance, I went clothes shopping today. I didn't need any more clothes. I have perfectly suitable clothes at home, but I wanted to upgrade my wardrobe a little bit. Is that wrong because I bought clothes that I didn't need? I mean, isn't gambling just buying enjoyment for me to have? Like, we spend money to go to like Stars and Stripes or whatever. That's me spending money on something I'm not going to get back. Is that wrong?
Landon, I want to strategically approach this question
Start with the fact that is gambling wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
We need to break down this question. Let's first start with, is gambling wrong? And then and then we'll tackle
work up
what about all this frivolous stuff that we don't really need.
Have at it. No.
So I have 3 quick reasons on why gambling is wrong.
Dang.
And I've got 3 scriptures. I'm only going to read the last scripture. So the first reason is gambling is a sin because it goes against how Jesus commanded us to treat people. He commanded us to treat people how they want to be treated. When we gamble, we want other people to lose. And Romans 8:8-10 is a good fulfillment of this.
Did you get that from the Apologetics Press website?
I did not, actually.
Did you get that? What book did you read that from, Noah?
I was taking notes the other day, and it came into my head, so I wrote it down.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I've heard it before.
that's
I've heard it before, but yeah. So
that's
that's the first reason. The second reason, it's also wrong because even if we can gamble moderately, even if we're not really losing a lot of money and I get fun out of it, what if someone else has a gambling problem and I am making that worse? I'm basically telling them it's really not wrong to gamble, so go do whatever you want, and they end up losing all their money because they have this problem and they saw me doing it. And the scripture for that is 1 Corinthians 8:12-13, where Paul says, if eating meat causes my friend to stumble, I will not even eat meat. And I would apply that same rule to gambling. And then finally, it's wrong is the third reason it's wrong is, can we really be a good steward of our money if we're always gambling? And wouldn't that money be best spent somewhere else? And that kind of leads to the question you were saying, but let me go ahead and read this verse. In Proverbs 13:11, it says, wealth gained by dishonesty will be diminished, but he who gathers by labor will increase. So in another version that I liked better basically said, wealth gained rapidly, wealth gained quickly will diminish, but wealth gained by continuous labor will always be there. So those are the 3 reasons I had just to tackle gambling, right? And that's really the way that I broke it down. And I think if you take all those 3 reasons together, you really have no argument for gambling.
Landon, would you add to that?
He stole my thunder. Good.
Yeah, because he came with 3 points and 3 scriptures. Like, I mean, he's gonna steal everybody's thunder with that.
When we say casual gambling, what you've kind of just cut off is people are like, well, we understand that like excessive gambling where I throw my life saving, it's just
bet the house, baby.
It's just wrong. And I think of like Luke 12:15 where Jesus says to stay away from covetousness. So one of the main things that gambling, especially when you're talking about betting large amounts, is you're gonna covet. I've heard a guy that said, I can gamble and not covet that dude's money. What are you playing for?
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to bet against you 2 guys, we're playing blackjack, and there's money on the table, my thought process is to win. Why? To get the money. What have I done? I've looked at something you had, and I wanted to take it. The literal definition of covetousness.
People are going to be flame. I'm going to get flamed. People are going to be, Benjamin's a gambler. He has to be. But I just like, the way I learn and the way I deal with problems is by asking every kind of question I have about those problems. So if we're sitting down, though, if us 3 are sitting down to play some blackjack, like, we throw in, a little money to raise the stakes, like, I'm not coveting your money. I'm just adding to the enjoyment of winning and losing.
I think number 1, how can you know that we're not?
Yeah,
that's true.
You're making you could be making us
covet. The 3
covet.
principles that Noah brought up were mainly like influence.
Yeah.
The Christian, what I would call the Christian principle, and then what's the other one? Stewardship.
Yeah.
And those were 3 good ones. And really what you can kind of encompass that in is the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them be treated. I cannot go into this game of betting if there's money. Did you know you can play cards without betting? Did you know you could do that?
Shocker.
Crazy, or you just be like, "Hey guys, I got a bag of donuts. Winner gets the bag of
Yeah.
donuts." Like I'll play just
What
as
if I'm
hard.
coveting?
I'll play
What if
just
I'm
as hard.
coveting the bag of donuts?
Well, that's another problem that we'll have to address on another podcast.
Anytime you've put in stakes, what I've done, and going back to that definition, in order for me to win, you have to lose. And that kind of encompasses the Christian principle. And even if it's just us, when I go into that game, what I want to happen, naturally, no one is going to go into a game wanting to lose.
Yeah.
When there's money involved. You can
Yeah.
play games like, some people say, well, gambling's wrong because there's a risk factor. Just because there's a risk factor doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
Just because it's competitive, that's not why it's wrong. What's wrong is I've brought something of value to the table, and I'm taking the chance of taking that from you. There's just no Christian principle. And again, this kind of brings it back up. If you're not a Christian, this thing about influence, about the Christian principle, about stewardship, this is not going to matter to you. The thing about, statistics, you joked about that, and I didn't look up any, but I've heard them through the lessons about people that struggle with gambling are over 50 times more likely to steal, to murder, to do all of these kinds of things, and you can just see the problem. So when you bring up just us playing, every single one of those principles are still there. I still have the influence. Us 3, we may think there's nothing wrong with it. Word spreads fast. Hey, did you hear Noah, Benjamin, and Landon bet?
Yeah.
Did you hear No Midget Landon were running a blackjack game at church?
So, I mean, they did it, so surely it can't be wrong. Or what if someone in the world, did you know people in the world, there are states that you have to be at least 18 to play games in the casino. Why did they put it at 18? Why did they put drinking at 21? Because they know it's wrong.
Yeah.
And so if the world is willing to admit, hey, yeah, this is something kids shouldn't do, that's an influence that we're going to have on the world. If people in the world are like, you bet too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It leads to so many other vices, right? It is the pathway. Whereas, like, you could, again, I think that there's a similar argument made to moderate drinking.
Yeah, that's what I've been kind of thinking about this whole
well,
time.
You can debate maybe it's wrong, maybe it's not wrong, but it's the pathway. It's on the pathway of what's wrong, right? It will lead you. It leads to nothing good. I can tell you that much. Why are we trying to get
The means
so
doesn't justify the
yeah?
end.
Why are we trying to get so close to this dangerous thing without getting hurt? Right?
One of the things, like, we watch old westerns, right? And the old preacher comes in and he preaches fire and brimstone on the places of sin. And what is that? It's
A bar and casino.
a bar. Yeah, it's a bar where you have drinking and gambling, right? And those two things, the reason we're probably thinking of them is because they go together, right? Where there's gambling, there's gonna be drinking, and where there's drinking, there's gonna be gambling, right? And so, gambling just sets a bad precedent for us as Christians, because we live in, now I'm not saying if you lived in a culture where gambling was, culturally appropriate, it would be okay, but we still have an idea in, the United States that gambling really, there's something shady about it, right? It's not quite as open and as, well intended as it's meant to be. That's why there's an age limit on it. That's why kids can't, well, if there's an age limit on it, that means kids can't do it. That's why there's an age limit on it. That's why even certain states don't, like Alabama doesn't allow like
Lottery.
the lottery. We don't allow, I don't even think you can bet on sports apps.
In Alabama?
Yeah, I think you'd have to, like, if I was to make a sports bet, I'd have to download it, drive to Tennessee, make the bet, and drive back. Like, because I think I've heard of people doing
Wow.
I wonder why that is.
yeah, like, and so we still have this idea of, so Christians wouldn't want to equate themselves with anything like that.
Yeah, and there is no, you cannot give me a good reason for gambling, right? There is none. And the one argument I've heard is like, well, what about we donate the money they spend gambling
Yeah.
to the schools?
Yeah.
Well, why not just
That's the lottery. It's
yeah,
like,
but why not just donate the money to the schools without the lottery? Why not just give them the money directly?
For, like, just,
And
there's
I-
so many other ways,
I mean,
so many better ways
that's
you could
literally one of the
money.
main 3 arguments. The ones they're going to bring up is like for lottery, it's going to the schools. Another one they're going to bring up is it's just me and my friends. I've
Yeah.
heard this before. It's just me and my buddies. None of us are financially insecure. This is not going to be I'm throwing away my life savings. We all realize, and we're not going to covet. It's going to be okay. We're just going to play a couple rounds, and then we're going to call it a day. And we're not, excessively, we're being good stewards because this is what we're going to get to. It's our entertainment. But the fact that the principles are still
Yeah.
there I don't care who you're playing with or how much money there is. There's no way that you can keep the kind of mind that Christ wants you to playing that game when you've thrown in something of value. It just can't happen.
Replace the example Lennon just gave and say drinking.
Yeah.
It's just us and a few friends, right? We're only gonna have a few drink. Well, we don't covet, or
We
We're
don't.
not gonna get drunk.
We don't
Yeah.
have a drunk. We none of us have a drinking problem. We're not gonna get drunk.
We'll ask this question: would Jesus gamble? Would Jesus say what Landon just said? Well, Jesus and a few of his
Just me and
friends are
Peter.
going to go, yeah, just going to go. John will probably lose.
But I love him.
We're going to go. And no, you wouldn't see Jesus saying that. And I don't think anyone can justify in their minds Jesus saying, yes, I would gamble.
But Jesus is the Son of God, and Jesus could make it so
boy.
he couldn't lose. So if Jesus couldn't lose, it wouldn't be gambling.
Jesus is the Son of God. He can make it to when he drinks.
But
He
still
doesn't
had to
get
take
drunk.
That, well, he still had to take that money from his disciples.
Ah, it's true.
Yeah. Exactly. Jesus is the Son
But
of
it's
God.
almost at that point,
Jesus-
disciples are almost giving it to him at that point. Like, if you're betting against Jesus, you put money in that pot, you are not walking home with that money. Okay?
It's why Jesus never did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, Jesus did it because it wouldn't, what we've been saying, it wouldn't
Yeah.
set a good precedent.
Yeah,
I'm just
exactly.
thinking of that idea.
And
of
there
Jesus
is
gambling.
there's no good reason, like me and Landon have talked about. There's no good reason to gamble. Do you want us to get into the second part of what you said?
Sports betting?
No, about
Oh, yeah.
You
Buying-
kind of compass that in
Frivolous-
gambling.
fri-
buying people buying
Second-
things they don't need.
secondly, Second question. My first question led to my second question. If gambling is a sin, should we cease buying all frivolous things we don't really need? Right? Because it's gambling. Why can't we just chalk up gambling to being expenses that that are like movie theater tickets? Because like I'm watching Super Bowl, and it's a lot more entertaining when I have Patrick Mahomes over 260 passing yards. Right? Like that's just a random example, but.
Of course, he picked Patrick Mahomes.
He'll probably get it too. But like, it's a lot more entertaining. Like, is it not just paying for more entertainment? Like,
Landon, do you want to take this one first?
I mean, I think we've already explained that. I'm going to start with there's a difference between entertainment and gambling. I can go to a movie, and I'm not going to read through the definition again because it's a lot, and I'll get it all mixed up again. But I can watch a movie. I can go to the mall. I can do all these things without it being gambling. The problem with gambling isn't that it's entertainment. The problem with gambling isn't that it's competitive, because if competitiveness is wrong, then we shouldn't play sports and we shouldn't play card games. We shouldn't do all these things. The problem with gambling isn't that. The problem with gambling isn't the risk factor. Remember the parable of the talents? Jesus told them to put it into the exchangers. There was risk in that.
Yeah.
But he wanted them to do something with their money other than throw it away. None of that is what makes gambling wrong. What makes gambling wrong is what we've already covered. And so, in and of itself, is gambling okay because it's entertainment? No, because gambling is sinful entertainment. Just like drinking is sinful entertainment. I could say, well, can't we watch a movie that's rated R for some very specific reasons? And it's just for entertainment,
Yeah, I was gonna go to the movie example too. It makes a good point. If you're talking about entertainment, then you have to go to like
you have to
R-rated
be
movies and
careful
stuff.
with that. And
that's true.
the point of gambling is, if you try to put gambling with entertainment, you can't do that, because gambling and safe entertainment are two totally different things. Now, however, I'm actually gonna preface this with, I'm a guy that has a problem with shoes. I
Ooh.
Yeah, we
genuinely
know.
do. I don't spend a lot of money on lots of things, but I like shoes. I like to collect shoes. I like to buy shoes. And the question gets brought up, Landon, you don't need any more shoes. You're buying things you don't need. And then you think about Hebrews 13:5. And I don't know if any of you were expecting me to go to this. But
No,
it
I
says,
wasn't actually.
let your conduct be without covetousness. Well, that's interesting. That kind of takes us right back to gambling, which is the whole root of gambling is built in covetousness. Let your conduct be without covetousness, but be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Now, I'm not saying if you go to the movies when you could have just stayed home and talked to your family that you're going to hell. We have this line that we have to be careful on, because when you say, I spent money on frivolous things, Landon, you just bought another pair of shoes. You already have like a lot of pairs. You don't need another pair of shoes, and that was frivolous. Is that a sin? On the one hand, you have to consider, Jesus did say, or whether this was the Hebrew writer, be content with what you have. Paul said, I'm content with whatever I have. I don't go through life, wanting this or wanting that. And so you have this dividing line, and it's something that I think we all have to think about. of being frivolous with our money, I think one of the first things that you have to do is you have to give to God first. A lot of people, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I have to make the point now. But a lot of people, I get my paycheck, and first half goes to car insurance, the next half goes to this, and then you have all of these things, and then I got $20 left. Well, I'll give that on Sunday.
Yeah.
That is wrong. I don't care what you bought. The first should go to God. And then after that, you have to be careful with your money. Jesus didn't call us to not have anything. Jesus is okay with us enjoying life in ways that are not sinful. But I do preface that with, am I going to tell you that it's wrong to, I don't want to say frivolous because it depends on how you interpret frivolous.
Yeah.
But buying things that you enjoy, is it wrong for me to go to the movies? I'm not going to say that's wrong because I think I would be wrong to say that. Is it wrong to buy lots of things that you do not need and not have given to God first and not have given to those who need? If I bought a pair of shoes that I do not need and I know someone who does need something and I was like, I don't really care, I want them, I'm not content with what I have. And the main thing Paul was, or the Hebrew writer was making, is that people will live their life, I want a better car, I want a better house, I want all these things. We as Christians cannot live like that. But I think we as Christians do have to be careful that there's a difference between gambling and buying things that we don't need. But we have to be careful when we just say whatever we need isn't sinful, because we can get it sinful over there too if we're not giving to God first and we're not being careful with what we buy.
Yeah, I agree.
As with everything in the Straight Fire podcast, I think the main theme that we always have is prioritize God first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I mean,
If
that's
you're
life.
gambling, no matter how much you're gambling, I don't care if you're betting $1, I don't care if you're betting 100, I don't care if you're betting $100,000. You're not prioritizing God first. You're not prioritizing. I'm struggling with that word. You're not prioritizing God's church, right? And that's the problem that we face. And when you're about purchasing frivolous things, like talking about, I bought some clothes today, right? I work and I have the funds to be able to do that, but I make sure I gave to God. I gave to God today, and I'm going to give to God next week. I have that plan is in place, and that money will not be used for anything else but that. So, now could that money have gone towards other things? Yeah, there's reality where it does, but God doesn't. I'm walking myself right into a trap. And I just think we have to be aware of our spendings and like, oh, hey, it's been a while since I've given to a charity, or maybe this month I'll, bump up my contribution a little more, or I'll give to this, hurricanes just came through. I'll give to this hurricane relief thing, right? I'm not saying like, I spend $50 for clothes here and then $50 for hurricane relief. I'm not saying that, but you should have a conscience that's telling you, hey, I've been blessed like this. It's time to bless other people, right? It's okay if I get things for myself. That's okay, as long as I'm not, as long as I'm not neglecting people around me. But have the wherewithal to know that I need to be able to give to others as well, right?
Yeah, when I was studying for this podcast, I kind of, I had to look a little internally, right? Because I don't gamble. That's not my problem. I don't deal with anything like that. But like, what am I spending my money on? And there will be times, and right now I work a part-time job, so the money I have it's not a constant supply of money, right? So like I make different amounts based on how much I work each week and stuff. So I give a percentage to God. But what'll happen is I'll get paid, let's say Monday. Well, Sunday rolls around and I have a percentage that I've set aside to give to God, but I mean, maybe, and I'm calling myself out here, how many times do I be like, it's going to be a little tight to give God what he needs this week because I've already spent so much money. By the time Sunday rolls around, I've already spent a week's worth of money right there. So like, I'm not really prioritizing that as much as I should. I had to call myself out and be like, I should be a better steward of what God has given me because it's not mine. I think we feel this entitlement to what money we make, right? I made this money. It's my money, and I'm just going to give God a piece of it. That's not how it works at all. God has given you all this money, and he asks for very little back, if you really think about it. He's not asking that you give up all your possessions, like Landon said. He's merely asking you that you give some back for the work of the church. And there's a really good quote that made me think about this.
Do you know who quoted it?
C.S. Lewis.
Of course. Okay.
There's a really good quote that made me think about this. C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity was talking about charity, right? And I think it's both like giving to just regular charities and giving to the church and the church's work. So hear this out, and I think it really, really is a good point about just managing your overall money. So here's what it says. I'm afraid the only safe rule is give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditure on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc. is up to the standard of those around us with the same income as our own, we are probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch us or hamper us, I should say that they are too small. There ought to be things we should like to do but cannot because our charitable expenditure excludes them.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's a great quote. Maybe,
It's a good
man,
rule.
I would love to buy another pair of shoes.
Call me out, man. Call me out.
Yeah, we're
I would
riding the
love
shoes
to
down
buy.
for the rest of the
I would. Okay,
podcast.
I'll call myself out. I would love to go eat out one more time.
Yeah,
But
Chick-fil-A.
but I've already promised this money to God, and I've already promised this money to the church, so I can't do that. The rule should be, and C.S. Lewis here is talking about the only, well, how do we know we're giving enough? Well, really the only safe way to know is when it hurts you. When you're giving something up and it means something to you. And that makes the command in 1 Corinthians 16, talking about contribution, so much more powerful because God wants joyful givers. He wants people who are giving up a lot, and he wants them to give it up joyfully, right? God, I know this is all yours. I'm giving it back to you, even if it means there are some things on earth here that I cannot do. So we have to make sure that however we're spending our money, not just gambling, that we give God enough and we're not hampering the work of the church by our own wants and desires.
That's good. We have time for one more question, unless Landon, you want to add anything to that before we move on.
Let's move on.
Okay, so these things are really sinful, right? Gambling is a sin. We need to make sure that we're not just gambling, but also keeping our entire purchases, all of our purchases in check. Get it in check.
Okay.
If these things really are sinful, what message should we bring in? What message should we bring in trying to dissuade people from doing it? Right? You're on a pedestal out in the world. What are you proclaiming them to let them know that gambling is a sin?
Am I talking to the world or to the church?
Let's go church first. You're talking to the church. You're up on the pulpit. You're trying. Maybe this is a church
This podcast.
Maybe this church is next to the local casino, right? And you're trying to make sure the members stay vigilant against gambling. What are you going to stand up in that pulpit and tell them?
Everything we just said.
No.
No, okay. No, I'll play along. I would go over the three things we said originally.
I was gonna say everything we just said.
Literally.
We covered. We Landon said at the
You're
beginning.
standing up in that pulpit, and this
Landon
is already
said
listed in
at
this
the
podcast.
beginning of the podcast, this is for Christians, right? And if I knew the church was struggling with this sin of gambling, I would tell them, hey, this is not the example we want to set to the people around us, to the people in this casino. We want them to see us coming to church and then not going to this place. And we want them to question, well, we think it's okay, so why do they never do that, right? Why do they never come here? Why are they always, why do we, when we, the world, invite Christians to maybe come with us and join in our fun, they're like, no, sorry, I can't. I don't really have the money for that. I've already given that money to God. Right? Well, that's a conversation starter, and you just have to get it into their minds. We all have to get it into our minds that this doesn't belong to me. This money does not belong to me. It belongs to God. And show them, honestly, start by showing them everything God has done for them, right? I mean, he created them. He not only created them, but he saved them when they offered him nothing in return. Show them those two things, right? And how all of this is God's blessing. And then I think people will be much more careful before they just blow it away.
Yeah, Landon, would you add to that?
There's a lot of things that we as Christians, and I don't mean us specifically, but that we kind of undermine. You shouldn't gamble because, it's not good and you can lose your money. This is a salvation issue. There are things that you can lose your soul over, and this is one of them. And so you have to understand that this is not just something that's not smart. This is something that is sinful. And then, of course, I would walk you through why it is.
Yeah.
I'm just going to tell you shouldn't do this. That's never a good idea to just tell them. You have to explain why.
But Benjamin doesn't want us to do that
No, it's
because
we're not going to do that.
because he doesn't want us to talk about things we've already talked about.
If we're not paying attention and you want to know what we're talking about, rewind about however many
Rewind.
minutes it was. And these principles are true. I mean, you have to be a good steward with your money. You have an influence, and you as yourself have to guard yourself in the principles that you're going to follow in your own life. And I think that's what I would say to the church. Now, I don't know if you want us to go into the world, but I will say if I was talking to
I
somebody,
mean, if someone up in the world comes to you, hey, like, why can't
I can't exactly,
why can't I gamble?
I can't exactly just tell you it's not a good Christian principle, and you know you're gonna mess up your
Well,
Christian
I'm
influence.
not a Christian.
I'm not a Christian. I don't care. And they might not mean that derogatory, but
Yeah.
that doesn't
Yeah,
affect them.
I mean-
That's like telling someone that's in the world that you need to worship every time the doors are open because that's an influence. I don't go to church.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, the statistics speak for themselves, and that's something we didn't bring up because we all know.
Yeah.
This is something that you can mess up your relationship, your marriage. You can lose everything. There's a lot of problems, and there's a reason there are now gambling helplines. This is a problem.
Yeah, that's true.
And I will say that covetousness, that's something that even if you're not a Christian, you have to watch out for because gambling, what it does is it always leads to other problems. It's like comparison. Comparison is going to lead to depression. It's going to lead to envy. It's going to lead to jealousy. It can lead to a bunch of other things.
There's a great podcast on that.
There's a great podcast on that. Drinking, it leads to endangerment of other people's lives. It leads you to saying things that you shouldn't say. It leads you. Gambling's the same way. It's going to lead you to covetousness. It's going to lead you. A lot of people will lead you down a path of isolation. It's going to lead you down a path of lying. It's going to lead you down a path of, for some, stealing and for some, murder.
Yeah.
You just need to stay away from that. Even if you're not a Christian, you're going to understand that there's going to be a lot of problems that you could have avoided if you just would have stayed away from it.
I mean, it's like bad entertainment. Bad entertainment will lead you to places that you really don't want to be.
I mean, when you're setting up a help, it should be telling when they set up a helpline for
Yeah.
it, right? They set up an alcohol. They set up an alcohol, you know,
And that's when
an
everyone's like,
alcoholic helpline. Yeah.
This is a problem.
But like, you know, there's probably more statistics that I could have, but I don't. But like, when you like, if I was to talk to someone in the world about drinking, right? Hey, when you're taking a drink, you're risking, like, it could take over your life, but, like, alcohol by itself is just completely, it's not healthy for you at all, right?
Well,
and, like, so if I'm talking about gambling, hey, it's the same thing. Hey, like, yes, it's a little thing. Hey, I'm only having one drink. Hey, I'm only betting $10. But it can lead you to places you don't want to go. And, like, it's still, you know, like, it's just the principle of it, like, you know, I don't like fireworks. Kind of freak me out sometimes because I don't like watching money burn. That's kind of the same thing. Like, no, I love watching fireworks. It's just that I don't want to pay. I will not willingly pay for fireworks. Maybe a few, but like,
I mean, you'll make a good point, right? If we're talking to someone in the world about it, well, we don't have to go to the Bible to show that gambling is wrong.
Physical conditions that happen.
Again, related to drinking, I think not everyone in the world, right? But maybe you're talking to someone who's a little more conservative in their views, and like, yeah, I understand, yeah, drinking's wrong. Well, relate that to gambling for them. Well, just because drinking doesn't bother you doesn't mean that someone else might not struggle with it, and because you did it, that means you're leading them down a path of absolute utter ruin in their life. Gambling's the same way. Just because you're not bothered by gambling, maybe someone else will be bothered by gambling. And that's why we as Christians, one of the reasons anyways, that we as Christians stay far away from it.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got me mid-stretch. I thought you were going to keep going a little bit there.
Sorry.
Landon, would you add anything to that before we close this podcast?
No, I mean, I think we covered just about everything. I mean, just one of the main things as a Christian that you're going to try to fall back on is it's just us. You know?
Yeah.
Anything that you'd want to do in gambling, you can do without it being sinful. I can play cards without it being wrong.
Yeah.
I can do all of these
I had
things.
one more question, and just really quick when Landon finishes.
I mean, I can do all of these things without it being sinful and without ever getting to the line. Even if, and I'm not saying, but even if it was okay for us to bet in our own house where it affected no one else, even if that was okay, we could not do that and save our influence. There are times when we just need to stay away from the line. It is a sin. I'm not saying that it's not. It is a sin, but even if it wasn't, we should stay away from it because we don't need it.
Okay. All right. So here's my thing. This is it's a little humorous as it goes. Let's say we're playing a game of blackjack.
Okay.
I walk in and we're not betting money. I walk in with a pack of freshly opened Oreo cookies, and
I would walk away.
We each get. Yeah, I know you don't like Oreos, but play along. We each get an equal amount of Oreo cookies, and we're playing. It's not wrong to like play for Oreo cookies, right?
I think
I could say something, but I'm not
I'm
going
looking over it. I'm looking over it.
they both looked at me.
Wait,
and I was
go
like,
to Landon.
"Yeah,
Go to Landon.
Yeah,
because you look like you were about to say something.
Yeah.
We need the wisdom right now.
I think this is going to be kind of a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
There are some people, remember in my
That's true,
definition
yeah.
of wager, is something of value. You bought those Oreos. Some would say
Like
that,
Oreo cookies.
that is of value.
Yeah.
That's just like people bet their property. Well, you bought that. That's not money, but that's your
Yeah.
property that you bought. I bought those Oreos. Others would be like, we're talking about things that really matter.
Yeah, I wouldn't draw like a hard line and be like, bam, this is sinful if you're betting
I
Oreos.
think we should be careful
How
because
dare you?
especially younger people are going to be like, oh, they're betting Oreos. Well, if betting Oreos is okay, as someone that's just thinking through
Yeah.
this,
Jimmy, come here. Get your piggy bank.
But you have to be. What if you like? You have. Sorry, I'm thinking of funny things about the example. You have to be wise.
Do you not like my Oreo cookies?
No. I'm telling you, like, what if you're like 4 Oreos in debt, and like you owe someone like me Oreo? Oh, I don't have 4 Oreos, but I've got like 10 Oreo minis. So I'm all in, baby.
these guys.
No, okay, but no, like you have to be wise with your example. You have to be wise with the way you present yourself, even if and Christians have to think about little things. Again, I'm not gonna draw a hard line. Bam, betting Oreos is sinful. I'm not saying that.
God is going to cast you into hell if you bet Oreo cookies.
But
That sounds like that sounds like a great title.
But be wise. There are other ways to have fun.
I mean,
there
going
are
back to it, can you eat the Oreos and play the game without betting the Oreos? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you don't even have to worry about it.
But what I said is like I've already bought the pack. Oh,
End it.
Dang it!
And on that note,
I've already bought the bag of Oreos. Right? They're gonna get eaten no matter what. Like honestly, I probably tend to eat a few less of the Oreo cookies. So like like I'm sharing them with friends. I'm sharing them with friends and family anyway. Like
Yeah, and again,
And that's
be
why
wise.
I can't tell you that you're going.
Yeah,
wrong.
be
I
wise.
can just tell you there's probably a better way to do it, and then we don't have to worry about it because right now we're in a game of is it wrong, is it right? I don't know. What and if we do it, well, what if we were wrong?
Again,
Yeah.
there's
What
a
if I don't do it?
there's
and I was wrong?
there's a safe rule of like, if you're questioning, just don't even try it.
Yeah,
Just
but
stay away
now
from it.
everyone's gonna be questioning the next time they bet Oreo cookies on blackjack.
I would love to talk to somebody who has bet Oreo cookies on blackjack. If there are any of those people, come find me.
Put
Yeah.
it
And
in the
talk
comments.
and talk to
Yeah,
me,
we'll comment,
and we
please.
can talk about that.
That is in Spotify. And when you upload podcasts like Spotify, it lets you add a poll. Like, that's gonna be the poll question.
just
Have
you
you
bet
bet Oreo
Oreos
cookies?
cookies
on a card game. Just say on a card game. But no, like
blackjack. It's
come
gotta be- it's gotta be
and we will
specifically
debate the
blackjack.
specific ethics of that scenario
We will
right
get
there.
you a microphone. We will set you up, and we will all talk about betting Oreo cookies on blackjack.
But yeah, I guess we got a little silly at the end of the podcast, but the principles still stand.
It's always good to have. I think it's always good to have a little fun, especially after the last podcast episode that we did. That was a bit more serious, but sometimes it's okay to be lighthearted about some
Yeah.
stuff. Now obviously read the room, right? If you're talking to a struggling gambling addict, it probably wouldn't. This conversation wouldn't be the best route.
Did you bet Oreos?
This route wouldn't be the best to go. But it's okay to be, and so we don't have to be. I'm being very careful with what I say here. There was that stereotype of what was it called? Like they wore the hat, they were like the tall hats, and they're like not they're like old in the olden times of like always very extremely serious, right?
I can't help you.
The pilgrim
Oh,
like
okay.
very serious and stern.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have to be like that. Like it's now obviously joking about sin is something that you need to be very careful about. But like, we're not joking about people who struggle with gambling. We're talking about, betting Oreo cookies, right? So anyway, that's what I'd say to close the podcast. Anything else before we close?
Be wise.
Since I decimated Landon last time,
No,
I
just-
said that.
Just be wise as serpents.
Be wise, yeah.
Be as innocent
What
as
serpents gambles.
innocent as lambs and wise as serpents.
Fitting
Close
word.
the podcast.
Fitting words. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, right? Anyway, that will be the end of this podcast. Thank you all for listening so much. We pray that this podcast enlightens you about what God's Word says about gambling. We hope that you laughed a little bit with us, and we hope that you'll watch the next episode. And if you haven't seen any of the previous episodes, go ahead and check those out. I think they're all pretty good, but go form your own opinion. And if you have any opinion on this topic, let us know in the comments of the YouTube video, and go ahead and answer that poll if any of you have ever betted Oreo cookies on blackjack. I would love to know. I would love to see at least one yes, one truthful yes. But yeah, that's all we have. Thank you for listening to the Straight Forward Podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Okay, stop recording.